Hello, my name is Brandy Pethel. I'm a Master Gardener Extension volunteer in Jackson County, Georgia. And today I'm going to give a little presentation on pest management in the home garden. UGA Cooperative Extension offers its educational programs, assistance, and materials to all people without regard to race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability, or veteran status, and is an equal opportunity affirmative action organization. The University of Georgia Cooperative Extension is committed to providing access for people with disabilities and will provide reasonable accommodations if notified. Our mission is to extend lifelong learning to Georgia citizens through unbiased research-based education in agriculture, the environment, communities, youth, and families. UGA Cooperative Extension is a collaboration between Georgia County governments, the USDA, and the University of Georgia's Colleges of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences and Family and Consumer Sciences. The Master Gardener Extension Volunteer Program was created to assist cooperative extension by training Master Gardener Extension volunteers to provide unbiased horticultural information to Georgians through volunteer community service and educational gardening projects using applied research and the resources of the University of Georgia. And we also use other universities as well. We're not limited entirely to the University of Georgia. Okay, now to get to business. First, to talk about pest management, we have to say, what is a pest? We'll talk about some basic pest ID, insects, animals, also diseases. We'll talk about managing pests. So you monitor, assess, and take action. We'll go into good detail of what all those things mean. And then we'll look at one of my favorite resources on pests in the home garden. It provides pretty much everything that you need in order to manage your pest once you know exactly what you're dealing with. So first, what is a pest? Pests are organisms that damage or interfere with desirable plants in our fields and orchards, landscapes, or wildlands, or damage homes and other structures. They include organisms that impact human or animal health. They could transmit disease, or they just may be a nuisance. So a pest can be a plant, so a weed, that could be weeds in your yard, in your turf, weeds in your flower bed, weeds in your home garden. It's a plant that is just somewhere you don't want it to be. A pest can be a vertebrate, that's birds, rodents, deer. That's a big pest for a lot of us in home gardens. A pest can be an invertebrate, so no backbone. This can be insects, ticks, mites, snails, slugs, any of those creepy crawlies that don't have a backbone. Nematodes, which are often microscopic worms that live in soil, they can live in water, they can get into and feed off of plant material. A pathogen, which is going to be either a bacteria, virus, or a fungus that can cause disease in the plant. Basically, a summary is it's any unwanted organism. So anything that's there that is causing harm to either your water quality, animal life, the ecosystem, or eating something in your garden that you intended to eat for yourself is what you can consider a pest. So, okay, we know what a pest is. So what do we do? Like, how do you manage pests? There's a term that the cooperative extension kind of developed, and it's integrated pest management. It's a kind of a long word, so I'm going to kind of break it up so that we can kind of get a picture in our heads of what integrated pest management is. So integrated is all feasible types of control strategies are considered and combined as appropriate to solve a pest problem. So you're looking at your pest from all different perspectives. Pests, well, we just talked about what pests are. And then management's the process of making decisions in a systematic way to keep the pests from reaching intolerable levels. An example of this is a small population of a pest can often be tolerated. Total eradication of a pest is not necessary, and sometimes it's just not even feasible. An example of this is flying pests. You can get all the flying pests off of your plants in your garden, but guess what? The adults have wings, they're gonna come back. So learning how to manage a tolerable level of damage with some of these pests is part of integrated pest management. So the definition of integrated pest management, it's a science-based decision-making process that employs cultural, mechanical, biological, and chemical control methods in such a way as to minimize the economic, environmental, and public health risks associated with those pests and the pest management practices. And we're going to go into what each of these controls are when we talk about take action. So this is kind of the pest management process. So find a pest, then we start monitoring for that pest. We're going to assess the damage of that pest, take action, and then continue to monitor. So once you find a pest, you kind of find yourself in this cycle of monitor, assess, take action, monitor, assess, take action. All right, so now we found a pest. We're going to monitor. So we see something we think is a pest, and we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to see what's going on. We need to figure out what that pest is. You need to know what the plant is that the pest is on. Typically, we say scout for changes at least twice a week. That means going and walking your garden. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm typically out there every day just enjoying and seeing what's different and what's new in the garden today. So getting out there at least twice a week is not a problem for me. It's just getting to know your garden, noticing damage when it happens. You want to assess the damage potential, the need for control interventions, select effective management tactics for that pest and plant combination. That gets into some of that take action step. Some plants don't take certain amounts of, when you get to chemicals, some plants are really sensitive to chemicals. And so you would want to withhold that action until there's just no other option until you get there. And then use a hand lens and take photos. So here, the picture on the left over here is some downy mildew that you can see the organism a little bit better under the hand lens. You can really tell that it's something physically on the leaf, that it stands up from the leaf a little bit. It's not a hole in the leaf. It's not something physically there on the leaf. You can even maybe brush it off under the hand lens and you can kind of see all that better. So this is one of the little, I don't have one myself, but it's a little small eye lens that you can hold up. They're really small. They can fit in your pocket. You can use a magnifying glass too. A lot of times they work just as well. So first of all, we need to determine, you've got some leaf damage. Okay. Was it an insect? Was it, what kind of critter was it? You know, spraying a plant for an insecticide is not going to help you if it was actually a rabbit eating the leaves. So in the next few slides, we're going to look at some general injuries to leaf damage and tell you, for the most part, what it probably is. These came from Michigan State University. I have the link there at the bottom if you want to screen capture this page and take a look at their page. So small holes in the middle of the leaf or the edges chewed. The edges of the hole are leaf colored, so they're not turning brown or black or different colors. It's probably insects. If you can imagine an insect just munching on a leaf, they're just going to take away green. You're gonna have leaf remaining, okay? The upper and lower leaf of tissue is removed, leaving just the veins. Again, that's insects. This could be a really, really tiny insect that's in there in the leaf and it's eating everything but the veins. A tan leaf with top and the bottom intact, but no tissue between the top and bottom. So these would be your leaf miners. You've probably seen them. Columbine is one of the flowers that always has leaf miners. It is just, they love them. So you have a green leaf and you have little paths in it where you can see there's not a hole in the leaf, but it's tan where the green leaf matter is gone. That's an insect. The petiole of a tree leaf is cut or damaged and found on the ground, but the tree looks healthy. So the petiole is what connects the main leaf part to the twig or stem of the tree. So that would be an insect, just chomped that, dropped the leaf. Here's some pictures of this. So we have a leaf cutter bee on the side. So you can see right here, there's a little bit of brown there from just where the leaf is exposed to the air and it tries to seal off that damage. but you're not seeing a wide strip of brown around it. You can see here with the Japanese beetles that they're eating in between the veins. And kind of here with these sawfly larvae, they do the same thing. They're eating the leaf matter and leaving the veins. All right. If the entire leaf is missing, with or without the petiole or the connecting stem to the tree, it's probably some kind of animal. Rabbit, deer, just if that whole leaf is gone, it's something with a bigger mouth that took a bite of it, okay? Missing parts of the leaf, but nothing is left like the leaf mid-vein. So if half of a leaf is missing, veins and all are gone, again, an animal that just was able to take a bite of a part of a leaf. This one made me laugh. Hosta leaves removed to their stems. I describe hosta as a salad bar for deer. Deer love hosta. If it looks like somebody mowed it down, it's probably a deer or a rabbit. So these are needle damage. So tips of spruce new growth is cut off and on the ground in spring. It's probably squirrels. They like to eat that new growth. Ends of branches that have needles partially removed, or the shoot is cut and on the ground. That would be a deer. These are entire plant damage. So small transplants or seedlings cut off at the ground level. This is not damping off. We're going to talk about that later, but like completely cut through. Like you have a stub planted and then the seedling is laying over here. More than likely it's cutworms. They just munch straight through the stem. Small tender plants clipped off at ground level, but the plant is missing. That would be an animal. General plants missing altogether is typically animal. Another one similar to this where you don't have it clipped off at the ground level, but the plant is just gone. Pea plants do this. Plants don't do it, but voles are underground rodents that eat plants. And they will just from underneath dig a tunnel and find a pea plant and just poop, whole plant's gone. There's just a little hole left where it was. That's going to be an animal. And then newly planted bulbs dug up and pushed aside. Raccoon, skunk, they're in there digging and looking for grubs and things like that. And they just are pushing it to the side. Now, if that newly planted bulb is dug up and gone, probably a squirrel because they like to eat certain bulbs. Flower damage, the entire flower is missing. Maybe some of the stem is going to be animal. Flower bud and stem gone, animal. I have blackberries outside that just deer takes the whole flower bud and part of the stem off. Small round or black spots that look thin and dried out on mint, chrysanthemum, those are going to be insect. Small ragged or round holes on petals is going to be insect. We've all seen Japanese beetle damage on roses. That's your typical insect there. Vegetable damage, tomatoes close to the ground have holes poked into them, pecked into them. It's going to be birds. Vegetables or fruit touching the ground is chewed into on the bottom side. More than likely, these are slugs. They're just taking advantage of literally low-hanging fruit. Young green bean plants, for example, appear to be mowed down. Those could be woodchucks. Kind of like I said with pea plants, if the whole plant is just gone, it's probably voles. Squash and pumpkin leaves with gray and wilted areas and holes in the late summer. These are squash bugs. All right, so that's kind of covers generally vertebrates and invertebrates of which type of damage, what kind of damage are we looking at? And if we decide, okay, I have an insect or a slug or something eating my plant, you need to find out what is eating your plant. The best way to do that, you have to see the culprit. It's really hard to be certain of what is eating a plant unless you can see the little guy there at work. Some of these animals, some of these insects, they only come out at night. You may have to do a little bit of scouting at night. If you find some damage, come out at night and shine a flashlight, see if you can find something. Once you find or see a glimpse of something, you can use the Invertebrate ID from the Australia's National Science Agency. It's going to ask you questions like, did you see legs or no legs? And you click legs and you're going to go to the next question. And it'll say, did you see 3 pairs of legs or more than 3 pairs of legs? You pick one, then the answer is going to say, did you see antennae present? You know, so it's going to key you down to where you get to, it's not going to take you to a species of insect, but it's going to get you down to, oh, you have a larva of some kind, a caterpillar or a butterfly larva, or you have found a beetle, example. So this is going to get you, if you're not a buggy person, you don't know bugs, this is going to really help you get a general ID on that invertebrate. Okay, so we're going to walk away from vertebrates and invertebrates, and we're going to talk about pathogens here. 85% of plant disease is due to fungi, spread by spores via wind and splashing water. These are most everything, I mean, it's 85%, most everything that's wrong with a plant that is not insect, animal damage, or even environmental damage, frost damage, or your neighbor sprayed 2,4-D and damaged your tomatoes, things like that. 9 times out of 10, almost 8.5 times out of 10, it's going to be fungus. Bacteria, that is spread by splashing water. There are no spores, so you're not going to spread a bacterial disease across your yard. It's going to stay focused anywhere where rain hits soil and splashes up. Viruses are almost all spread by insects and mites. Those are what they call the vectors for plant viruses. You'll have symptoms, and then you will have signs with pathogen ID. A symptom is going to be something you can see happening to the plant, but it doesn't tell you whether it's fungal, bacterial, or viral, if that makes sense. So a symptom can be a spot, those are called lesions, or it can be spots that have coalesced together to form blight, which is a large spot. So you can see on the bottom on this bell pepper, there's some lesions. You can see on this basil leaf, there's some small lesions. And then on this tomato leaf on the right, there are large spots. Once you get that, we call that blight. Blight is a general term. It doesn't name a disease, it names a symptom. Some diseases have been named early blight, late blight. They're not great names. Really, all that says is you've got large lesions early in the season or large lesions late in the season. We have symptoms also of galls or tumors. So if you see something that looks like an abnormal growth, that's called a gall in a plant. And then cankers are sunken in lesions. So they're going to, like in this tree picture here, the bark is sunken in. It's a hole and the plant matter has sunken in. A couple other symptoms are rot. It's exactly what you think it is. It's plant tissue being degraded and literally rotting away. Then you have wilt, so the plant cannot get water. So if a pathogen is causing that wilt, you're going to find darkened water connecting tissue. If you look in this picture here, it's a tomato stem. You can see these tubes here that are carrying water up the plant, and they're darkened. So if you have wilt, pull off a good sized stem, peel it back. If there's dark tubes in there, then you have a pathogen that's causing your wilt. If you peel it back and there's no dark tubes, it could be lack of water. It's something environmental. It's not something that's caused by fungus, bacteria, or a virus. Another symptom is damping off. So we kind of mentioned this earlier. This is where you have a seedling, One day it's fine. Literally the next day, it looks like this. It is just completely shriveled up. It's fallen over. The stem appears to be intact. So, we're not thinking it's cutworms or anything like that. It's typically a fungal or a bacterial disease that causes that damping off. And then another symptom, and these are typically in viral diseases, it's mottling. So these are mosaics. You can see in these bean leaves here, there's obviously something off with this leaf. It doesn't have lesions in it. It doesn't appear to be rotting. It's just color is really wrong. It's really light in certain places, dark in other places, and they call that mosaic. You can also have the yellowing or crinkling of leaves or misshapen leaves. So here the tomato plants on the left, you can see that they're just really, really small and the leaves are kind of curled up, not shaped quite right. There, I do have a note, pesticide damage can cause this. So this also looks a lot like 2,4-D damage. It can curl up and make the leaves shaped really strange. Roundup damage also, especially in tomato plants, you can see this, the leaves kind of blanch out and they turn white, but they're not mottled, if that makes sense. Another symptom of a viral disease is yellow or necrotic rings on leaves or fruit. And I thought this picture did a really good job of showing those rings. You can see this on leaves and fruit, like here in this picture on this melon. And then another symptom of a viral disease would be shortened internodes or dwarfism. Again, this is another tomato plant. You almost can't even tell by looking at it that this is a tomato plant. It's really short and bunched up like it all started growing abnormally, right? So an internode is where you have a set of leaves and then it grows and another set of leaves. It's the internodes. It's between the leaf nodes, the growth nodes. So if those shortened internodes, if it, rather than 3 inches on typical, they are 3 centimeters, you're going to see this dwarfism kind of show itself in the plant. It's nearly impossible to get a positive diagnosis on plant disease on symptoms alone because there's overlap. Some bacterial diseases look just like fungal diseases. The viruses, a lot of times it's clear enough, but even then it could be pesticide damage that's causing something that looks like a viral issue. So you really have to kind of know what's going on around you, first of all, to rule out any pesticide damage. And then second, you have to look for signs of the disease. The sign of the disease is usually via microscope. So in people, think, symptoms of a urinary tract infection are fever, discomfort, frequent urination, things like that. The sign of a urinary tract infection is finding bacteria in the urine. Okay, so for a plant, it's exactly the same. You have all these symptoms that kind of make you think this might be what's going on, but to get the actual sign of the disease, you're going to need a microscope. 85% of those diseases in plants are fungal. So usually you can see that fungal growth with a hand lens. You can see it's fuzzy. You can see that mycelium, which is kind of the equivalent of roots in fungus. You can see spore masses where you kind of tap it and it goes poof and they float around. You can see the I can't say that word ever, sclerotia, which is a hardening, like a really hard mass that's different from the plant, like it's something that doesn't belong there. You can take a leaf that you think may have some fungal issue and you can put it in a jar with a moist paper towel if you can't find signs of the fungus. If you find symptoms and are looking for signs but can't find them, you can try to grow it out and see what happens. It usually happens pretty quickly. So here you can see on this first one, you can see some rust with the hand lens. You can see the fuzzy stuff growing on this stem here. And this is an example of where they grew it out in a jar. They put some moist brown paper towels there in the bottom and waited to see what grew out of it. So that fuzzy, the spores, that's how the fungus reproduces. And so this is a way to get a sign of a fungal infection. Bacterial infections, they typically have wet looking lesions. The bottom side might look greasy. So if you look in this first picture, I know it's small, but the lesions look, they look almost like if you grab a leaf and you squish it, but you don't put a hole in it, it looks wet. Whereas a fungal infection, sometimes those lesions look dry. On the center picture, you can see this is the bottom side of a leaf. It looks a little, it looks kind of greasy, like maybe, again, you have that same, like you squeezed it and you kind of broke some of those water holding cells in there. You may have that bacterial ooze in the morning. So you can see these little drips kind of oozing out of the stem. This is different from clear water that comes off of the tips of strawberry plants do this. In the mornings, it's just where part of their respiration, where they're releasing some of that extra water pressure out of the edges of their leaves. This is not normal. You shouldn't see this in a plant on a constant basis. And if you look at these little balls, they're not clear. They're not water. They're kind of cloudy. Okay. A wilting stem, if you peel it back and you see that dark material in there, that dark water conducting material, you can cut that stem, set it into some water, leave it very, very still. So set it somewhere where it's not going to get blown around or knocked over. And you will see after a little while these bacterial streams flowing out of the plant. And that's this is a sign. These are signs of a bacterial infection, not just symptoms. Okay. All right. So there's lots of resources that you can use to confirm some of the problems with the plant. You can confirm symptoms of certain diseases to say that it could be this or it could be that. Of course, the UGA extension website, that's extension.uga.edu. You can also use the local office. You can email things to me and I'll try to guide you the best I can via email. The UGA College of Arts and Sciences also has a way that you can search and you can look for materials there. There's two Facebook groups, if you use Facebook, that I do like for IDing plants, because like I said in the beginning, you want to make sure you know what kind of plant you have a pest on. Some pests are very species specific. And so it can help you narrow down what is on your plant because only certain things eat that plant. And then the What's Wrong with My Plant Facebook group as well. Another great one. You can submit pictures and get experts to kind of help guide you in that it's probably this or this. Here's what to look for, and so forth. Insectimages.org. It is what it says. It's just pictures of bugs. So if you have a bug and you're looking to confirm its ID, you can post it there. And then there's the University of California IPM. We're going to look at this at the very end. This is my all-time favorite resource for home garden pest problems. So you can select your plant and you can see a whole list of things that eat that plant. And you can click those and you can look at their life cycle and how to best manage them and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome. I'll show you that in a minute. All right, so we found a pest, we've monitored, we know what we're dealing with here. Now we need to assess damage. So what we do is we set a threshold. We need to know your pest. We do this in the monitor phase. The life cycle, when is it vulnerable? Like I said, the University of California IPM is wonderful for this. You need to wait until the pest population or damage is sufficiently high. I don't know, maybe it does more than 20% damage to the plant before you intervene. This depends on how old the plant is. Seedlings are going to be more vulnerable, obviously, because there's not much plant there. Leaves can sustain more damage than flowers or fruits can. Obviously, if a fruit is getting eaten by something, it's not going to be suitable for you to eat later. leaves can grow back. Plants can regrow those leaves pretty quickly. Flowers take a lot more energy and effort to grow. And the time for flower to fruit can impact that, whether a fruit actually makes of it. Another thing to take into consideration is your risk versus benefit of taking the action. So is this plant valuable? Is this a rose bush that belonged to your great grandmother that you were willing to take any action it requires in order to save the plant? Or is this a plant rescue that you bought from Walmart because it looked really terrible? Is the plant worth it to you? You got the cost of the control action: money, time, labor. It's not only money involved in the cost for taking different actions. Some things require a lot of labor, and is it worth it to you? Got to consider the environmental safety. So are there ponds and streams nearby? Other plants in the area that could be affected by your action, or human safety. You want to do things that keep you safe as well, and others. When it comes to chemicals, you want to make sure you're reading the EPA labels and the registration so that you know as much as you need to know the risks to you and to the environment on any of these chemicals. I know for me, my labels fall off of my bottles all the time. Make sure that you're writing if that label has fall off, right, with a permanent marker, or put some masking tape on it and reattach that label if you can. You can go to epa.gov/pesticide-labels, and you can print fresh information to keep on hand so that you always have that label information handy. Okay, so now say we've decided, okay, the damage has hit my threshold. This is too much damage for me. It's time to take action. I want to back up one step and just use an example in the assess phase. So tomato hornworms. Okay, we all get them on our tomatoes. I don't spray for them because I go out and I scout and I grab them and I throw them out into the yard for the mockingbirds to eat. If I didn't scout, if it was a month before I went and checked on my tomato plants, the damage would probably be pretty drastic to where I wouldn't have any tomato plants left, right? So by scouting regularly, you can take care of some of these issues without having to intervene besides a mechanical. So that's one of what we're going to get into this in a minute with take action, but literally grabbing the pest, removing it from the plant and throwing it, making it available to other predators of that pest, that's taking an action. Okay, so the damage to that hornworm may not be bad at the time you find it, but we all know how bad hornworm damage gets, and it's easy enough just to grab it and fling it. So okay, so now we're taking action. We've decided that our damage is enough that we need to intervene. Okay, these control methods are meant to be used from the right cultural through mechanical, biological, and then all the way to chemical control, and you graduate in intensity as you proceed. You should not jump straight to a chemical control. You also shouldn't jump straight to a biological control unless you have addressed cultural and mechanical methods first. We always, always, always use the least toxic method of control before moving to a more toxic method of control. Again, a mechanical control is grabbing that tomato hornworm and flinging it. That's very toxic to the hornworm. You're grabbing it with something, you probably caused some damage in there, and you're leaving it wide open without its food in the eyes of predators. Okay, that is less toxic than spraying BT, which is a Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a biological control for caterpillars, because any caterpillar that eats BT will die. And you may have butterfly host plants nearby. If you accidentally spray some of that, you have welcomed butterfly larvae to your plant and then killed them. So again, mechanical control is going to be less toxic than biological controls. Cultural controls are going to be less toxic than mechanical controls. All right, so now we're going to get into each one of these. Cultural control methods, these are things like plant resistant varieties. So those tomatoes that are hybrid that are resistant to tobacco mosaic virus and the different blights and I can't think. I can see the letters right now, but I can't get them in my brain. Those resistant varieties are going to actually resist the pest, the pathogen. Planting a species suitable for those conditions. So if you plant a water-loving plant in a very dry, sandy area, it's probably gonna succumb to some diseases or pest problems because it doesn't have what it needs to survive and be strong. That goes for rainfall, sun exposure, temperature, zone. So planting, stretching that zone 1 or 2 beyond where your property is, the zone it's in, you are likely going to see it succumb to some frost damage, which is obviously not something that is a pest, but frost damage is going to lead to some rot and some other problems. It may invite some pests in. You may have slugs and snails that are coming to clean all that up. But the ultimate problem is the conditions for the plant. You want to plant disease-free seed and transplants. Don't rescue plants. More than likely you're bringing some kind of disease or problem into your garden. Most of the time it's not worth it. It's best to buy healthy, disease-free plants. You want to rotate your crops or your annual plants to avoid recurring problems. And that means planting different things in that spot, kind of on a rotation. So tomatoes is one. They can get nematodes down into the soil that feed on the roots, causes a symptom of these root knots. So these are these growths that are on the roots. We can't see the signs of nematodes because we don't have these super powerful microscopes to be able to look at the soil, find the nematodes in there. But we can rotate crops, plant different non-Solanaceae family as the tomato family plants where plant them in a different place every year on a rotating basis, and you can reduce the population of those nematodes. And then you can remove overwintering sites like coal piles, damaged and volunteer plants, alternate hosts to minimize damage by insects and disease. So wood piles are places where you have an extra pile of mulch. All kind of insects can get in there and overwinter. I love wood mulch, but the challenge of wood mulch is you have lots of places for insects to hide out all winter. When you're culling diseased plants from your garden, don't put that into your compost pile. Don't just have a pile right on the edge of your garden, because all that disease is going to sit there and wait until eventually it breaks down and it gets tilled back into the ground, or it rains, it splashes onto the plants next door, and your disease is spreading. It's best to, if you live in an area where you can burn those diseased plants, or you can bag it in a trash bag, tie it up, and send it to the landfill. Another cultural control, you can change your planting time to grow when the pest load is lighter. You'll see on some of the University of California IPM page, it may say to plant this early and protect it from frost so that you can get your fruit before the adults come into season. Sometimes with a squash vine borer, this works, to plant earlier or later and miss that window where the adults are laying their eggs. It can happen reverse too. So onions, you don't want to plant those too early because the thrips come to them. So Knowing your plant and the recommendation for the best time to plant is important. You can promote vigorous crop growth with proper nutrition. Remove the weeds so that they get enough water. Weak plants are going to be susceptible to insect diseases or other physiological disorders. It's just like with any organism. If you don't have proper nutrition, your immune system as people, we're not going to be able to fight things off. It's the same with the plants. They don't have a immune system per se, but they have natural hormone responses to attacks. And if they're healthy, they can produce those hormones they need to fend off that attack. Irrigation is another thing that causes a lot of, it can cause a lot of problems. Remember, I kept saying things splashing on the soil can spread spores and bacterial infections. If the relative humidity is really, really high, you want to avoid irrigating that extends that high humidity. So if you think here in Georgia, we have really warm nights in the winter, or in the summer. So you don't want to water late in the evening and have these really just murky, warm conditions with no sun to evaporate off any of that excess water in the evening. It just opens the door for disease. So you want to water. It is best to water early in the morning on a habit if you can. If you go outside and your plants are wilted and you're sure it's not a disease that's causing the wilt, water the plants by all means. Don't not water them just because you want to wait till the morning. You just want to try to avoid getting water on the leaves themselves. It's another reason why mulch is great, because it keeps soil from splashing up on the leaves from the overhead irrigation and spreading those diseases that are just naturally there in the soil anyway. Okay, so we're going to step up to mechanical control methods. So if you picked up on it, cultural control methods are taking care of the area, planting good species or resistant species, making sure that your irrigation is the best it can be for the plant. You're not intervening to the plant or the pest yet. You're taking care of the environment around it and providing the best environment possible for your plant. Mechanical control gets into physical barriers, so that can be netting, mulch, fencing, hand destroying insects, or pulling, tilling, or hoeing the weeds. Again, this is where you grab the tomato hornworm and you chunk it. Typically you do this with low density in numbers. If you have 5 weeds in a little area, it's easier just to pull them than to even consider trying to spray them. If you have an entire area of woods that's covered in weeds that need to go, you may not be able to get them under control with a mechanical control because there's just not enough time in the growing season to be out there digging all of these weeds. You can prune or cut diseased or insect infected plants or plant parts. I have done this before with aphid damage. So typically when you find aphids on your plant, they're all going to be on the new growth at the very end of the plant. As long as I have other new growth that doesn't have aphids on it, I will just grab it, snip it, and take it outside and leave it out in the grass. Ants will, ants, spiders, they will all take advantage of the free meal that's out there. Mowing your turf grass at a recommended height. Bermuda grass likes to be short. It makes it so the sun can penetrate down to the base of the plant so that it can grow and it can be thick and lush. Keeping Bermuda grass too high causes it to be stringy and reaching for light, and it opens it up. Again, it causes it to be stringy. It's not as strong as it could be, and it becomes susceptible to fungal diseases. We talked about mulching. So adding mulch is it's a little bit of both, mechanical and cultural control. Mulching the garden and the ornamental planting is going to be a barrier for splashing fungal spores and bacteria onto the leaves, and prevents weeds as well. And then you can do directed water sprays at invested plants. This is great for aphids and lace bugs. If where I said you can't cut it off because maybe that's the tip of your plant, that's all that's there for your plant, you can take your water hose and put it on a pretty good jet and just hose them off. Just make sure that they're directed towards a plant or your grass where the aphids aren't going to be happy living there. Don't spray them onto something that they're going to be just as happy eating. But that's a great way to get the aphids off. Stepping up to biological controls. These are controls that occur naturally in the ecosystem. Learning to identify biological control agents. So these are insects that naturally occur out in the environment. It can be really helpful so that you don't misidentify them as a pest. So you can search for beneficial insects in the garden. This is a publication on beneficial insects. We'll see if we can get it to pull up here really quick. Beneficial insects and spiders and mites in the southeast. You can click on that PDF, and it's a this is showing you about how big it is. You have pictures, information describing the bugs. You can plant flowers that attract beneficial insects. For the most part, any flower is going to attract beneficial insects, but these little wasps and things, they really like the smaller flowers for the most part. You can see most of these are very small, small flowers. But these are wasps, the parasitoid wasps. They will lay eggs in tomato hornworms. Assassin bugs will, I mean, they are assassins. They just go grab aphids and eat them. They grab, they're non-discriminatory. They will grab any insect that is there and eat it. Some mites are predators where they will go and hunt bugs. Lady beetles are another one. They love aphids. Learning the life cycle of a ladybug can help you determine if you have ladybugs there. Oh, here's a picture of the tomato hornworm. If you see a tomato hornworm with these little Q-tip looking things sticking off the back, those are the cocoons of these little parasitoid wasps. So you want to leave that tomato hornworm to release all of those wasps. When the wasps are released, the tomato hornworm dies. There are also parasitic flies that the larva will tear up some soft-bodied bugs too. So let's see if I can get back to the presentation here. All right, so you want to plant a variety of flowers and plants to provide additional nectar sources for these beneficial insects. You've got to protect your beneficial insects. There's it's called rebounding when you spray a chemical on aphids trying to kill them. You kill off all the ladybugs. You end up missing aphids. They're tiny. You would almost have to dunk the plant into the pesticide in order to be sure that you covered all of the surfaces where aphids hide. So you end up leaving some aphids, but you killed off all your ladybugs. The next day you have 10 times as many aphids, even though you just sprayed it for something that kills aphids. So you want to make sure that you're not killing off your beneficial insects so you don't get that rebound population. You want to create habitats that attract birds and other wildlife that prey on those insect pests too. You can check out georgiawildlife.com nuisance wildlife and see a little bit of information about how that cycle works, where you attract birds that will eat worms, that will, so forth and so forth. All right, now we're on to chemical control. Always exhaust all your other methods of control before going to a chemical control. Go through your cultural controls, your mechanical controls, your biological controls. If all else fails, then fall to the chemical control methods. Used irresponsibly, pesticides can harm people, pets, and your environment. Much like medicine, pesticides can have tremendous benefits, but the misuse of those pesticides can have really serious consequences. You want to select a pesticide and formulation of that pesticide based on the pest, the plant, and the location. Some plants are not tolerant of certain pesticide formulations. the application equipment that you have available, pesticide hazards, and the applicator's experience. You can get a private pesticide license. It's some training that we can help get you into a class for earning that private pesticide applicator license. When I got my private pesticide applicator license, I can say I used less pesticide because I learned about IPM. I learned about how to work up to a chemical control. The answer is not always chemicals. And likewise, there's no single herbicide, insecticide, or fungicide that's appropriate for all landscape, vegetable, or ornamental pest problems. If you're going to turn to chemical controls as your first option, you're going to need an entire library of chemicals, and nobody needs that in their home. Nobody wants that in their home. There's not one magic answer that's going to take care of all your problems. So work through these other controls first, and then use chemical control as a last result. I do want to note it's illegal to apply a pesticide that is not explicit on the label directions. Before purchasing a pesticide, read the label. If you're standing there in Home Depot or Walmart and you're thinking about buying a bottle, take your fingernail, read the back and pull that label open so that you can take a look and read it. It's your right. You can read the label before you purchase it. That label, your local county extension office, the Georgia Pest Control Handbook. This is a resource that you can find on the UGA Extension website, are excellent resources to help you choose the correct pesticide. By doing the private pesticide applicator license, you'll learn about the Pest Control Handbook. It will help you with certain crops to know what the common pests are and then what the recommended chemical control is for that. That handbook isn't going to get into too much detail on cultural, mechanical, or biological control, though. It's mostly focused on the chemical control. Obviously, use care when applying pesticide to non-target plants. If you're going to use glyphosate to get rid of pest weeds, if you spray it on something that you don't intend to kill, you need to rinse it off. You need to really give it a good water and make sure that it's in the best possible situation to overcome the glyphosate damage. You can use cardboard to kind of block plants if you need to. You just need to be really careful. Same with wind, temperature, time of year, time of day, wet foliage. All these things can affect the action of the chemical that's being sprayed on the plant. So read the label, make sure that there's not a temperature cap or floor, sprayed at the proper time of year. Certain chemicals, glyphosate, for example, the plant has to be actively growing in order for it to take that chemical into the plant in order to kill it. If it's not actively growing, it's not going to absorb into the plant and move around. Another example with glyphosate, if you spray it over 85 degrees outside, you're going to have some weird volatilization happening. It can burn plants. It can have clouds that kind of float and go to non-target plants. So if the label says don't spray it above 85 degrees, just do what the label says. There's reasons that all those warnings and directions are on the labels. So if nothing else, just please follow the labels because they're there for a reason. If you have a serious pesticide exposure to you as a person or to your pet, you can call poison control 1-800-282-5846. Have the label handy so that you can tell them exactly the pesticide and the formulation for the exposure. All right, so after we take an action, we return to monitoring. So we trimmed off that piece of plant that had aphids on the end of it. It's not one and done and walk away. I took care of my aphid problem. There probably were more aphids that were not visible there on the plant at the time. So you want to keep scouting, see if you have another problem. Obviously, if you end up cutting the entire plant away, you've defeated the purpose of growing the plant. So at some point, you need to decide, when are you going to move from mechanical to biological, or biological to chemical, or to just try a different mechanical control method as well. Like I said, with spraying a stream of water on the plant. That may be what you try first, and if that doesn't work, then you clip and try to remove the plant, whether you bag them or you chunk them into your compost pile, because there's all kinds of critters in that compost pile that will enjoy an aphid snack. But like I said, you're going to go through this and you're going to continue to monitor and scout. If you find another aphid, single aphid, you know, squish it. You know, it's not, it's easier to take care of some of them like that rather than taking a drastic measure of removing a piece of plant. But you're just going to continue in this cycle. All right, so this is my last slide. We're going to go take a look at this UC IPM site. And I want to put this up here before we jump into that. This is my email address, jcmgev@uga.edu. You're welcome to send me emails of questions, send photos. You can also call the office at 706-367-6344. They will take your name and number or email address down and send it to me, and I can get back in touch with you if you prefer a phone call. All right, and again, you can go to extension.uga.edu, or you can also call 1-800-ASK-UGA1 and ask your question, and an agent or a master gardener volunteer will get back to you. So let's go to UC IPM. So I'm going to go to their main page so you can see where I go. So this is the University of California IPM page. And we're going to look at home and garden, because you guys are not growing fields of things. We're not talking about forest pests here or exotic and invasive pests. We're just looking at home and garden. All right. Most of you are interested in vegetables and things like that, but you can click flowers, fruit trees, lawns and turf, trees and shrub. You can look at structural pests in your home. Yeah, so we're just going to click here. And this is that page that I had on the presentation. I'm going to go tomato, because that's probably the one plant that nearly everyone grows. So you will all be familiar with these. The first thing you're going to get is a description of the tomato. You get the Latin binomial name for tomato, and then the family for the tomato. You're going to get the Latin name and also just the common name. This is the nightshade family. You're going to get a general plant description. Then you're going to have cultural tips. These are those cultural controls for tomato plants. All right, proper site selection, soil preparation, planting, and watering are important for plant health, pest management, pest reduction. Let's see, we'll click on cultural practices, cultural tips for growing tomato. So it's going to go into detail on site selection, soil recommendation, how can you improve your soil, prepare your soil, when do you plant? So at over 100 degrees, your flowers are not going to set. It's just going to keep making leaves and waiting for the temperature to drop again. All right, so this affects for when you plant. So these are planting dates for California. Again, this is the UC, University of California page. So these dates are not going to translate to Georgia, but you can find planting dates for Georgia on the UGA extension page. But you can see here that it says in the desert valleys, plant December to March. That sounds crazy for us here in Georgia. But if you were to plant in the summertime in the desert, it'd be so hot it would never set fruit. All right. How to plant tomatoes, how to fertilize tomatoes, how to water tomatoes, how to prune them, how to harvest and store them. So This is a general 1-page on tomatoes. All right. So let me turn this back on. All right. So you've made your cultural, we are taking the best care of our tomatoes as we can. But we found a pest. Okay. Hornworms. I mentioned it already. You guys know what a tomato hornworm is. If you click on this, this is going to take you to a page of general hornworms. There's thousands of hornworm species. They eat all different types of plants, but of course it's going to show you the tomato hornworm. This is the most common hornworm that we're going to find. So you can see a mature hornworm larva. This is what they look like when they're hanging out on your stem. And then they will also damage fruit too. So they'll eat leaves, stems, fruit, you name it. And that's what the adult looks like. It's a kind of nondescript moth. All right. Tells you how to identify the tomato hornworm. The life cycle, the damage is mostly common in midsummer. There may be a population peak in late summer. The larval form is the only stage that causes damage. The eggs are laid singly on leaves. The larvae feed and then burrow into the soil to pupate. The adult develops over the winter and emerges. So that tells you you need to deal with the larva before it drops into the soil and pupates, because otherwise that adult's going to come out and it's going to say, thank you for planting more tomatoes, and it's going to start its life cycle all over again. Solutions: handpick or snip hornworms with shears. They're natural enemies, can typically keep those populations under control. Tells you that the eggs are attacked by certain parasites. The larvae are attacked by, this is a parasitic wasp. This is that wasp that I was telling you about. Again, you can click all these links and you can kind of get into a rabbit hole of learning all about the different natural enemies to a pest. And there's some general predators, especially ones that will eat the larvae when they're smaller. Bacillus thuringiensis or spinosad, which is another chemical, are effective against the smaller larvae. Disking or rototilling after the harvest destroys the pupae in the soil and can prevent the adults from developing. So this is telling you some biological controls that are happening naturally. These are things you don't have to do anything except plant flowers that will attract some of these parasitic wasps to the tomato plants themselves. Bacillus thuringiensis or spinosad are things that you would spray. So Bacillus thuringiensis, like I said, it's a microbial insecticide, but it's a chemical control that uses a biological control method, if that makes sense. So this is going to give you a hazard rating for it. These are low, very low. Impact on honeybees, any natural enemies, the water quality rating, how to apply it, and examples of kind of home garden and landscape products. So these are things you might find in any of your big box stores. It just gives you a nice snapshot of Bacillus thuringiensis, and it's important that it's this Kerstocki subspecies. There's a couple subspecies of Bacillus thuringiensis that act on different things. There's one that is a mosquito larva killer. That mosquito larva killer is not going to kill your tomato hornworm larva. All right, so we'll go back and we can do the same thing on spinosad. So spinosad has got low for water quality. I believe this is low moderate. It's moderately dangerous for honeybees. So comparing the two, the Bacillus thuringiensis is much less hazardous than spinosad. But if you do Bacillus thuringiensis, shortened to BT, and you're not effective there, then you may need to step up to the next level. So it'll tell you here, impact on honeybees, toxic category is 3. You want to apply only during the late evening, night, or early morning. It's a contact insecticide. It has to touch the insect in order to kill it. If the bees are not foraging, then when you spray it, you're not going to spray any bees. All right, so this is the example there. So that's hornworms. Let's go back. We'll look at one more, and then we'll call it quits. Let's see what we got for beans. Again, you've got cultural practices, which you can click and see that. Let's look at cucumber beetles. These I have on my beans all the time. So they look a lot like a lady beetle, but they're going to be orange. They're not red. They kind of have a longer body as well. Again, this is going to be talking species specific to California, but you don't have to identify your species in particular. Seeing this guy on your bean plant and seeing evidence that it has been there, you can see the little insects there, is enough for you to know and confirm your ID of this thing is eating my bean plant. They'll feed on other things too. They'll feed on corn, small grains, beans, sweet pea, and several grasses. It says that they don't usually cause noticeable damage in gardens. They'll feed on, the larva feeds on cucurbit roots, so those are cucumbers, things like that, and can damage the crops. The beetles overwinter as adults in weedy areas and move into planted fields as soon as the plants come up. They lay their yellow-orange eggs at the base of plants or in soil cracks. The larvae burrow into the ground to seek out the roots, feed for 2 to 6 weeks, pupate and emerge as adult beetles, and attack the above ground portions of the plant. So the larvae are what causes most of the damage to a plant, okay? They can spread cucumber mosaic virus or various wilts. So the wilts, again, that's a fungal or bacterial disease in the water transmitting or water moving tissue in the plant. The larvae feed on the roots. It says corn may occasionally be damaged. Solutions: management of cucumber beetles is difficult. The older plants can support substantial numbers without serious damage. It says the best strategy may be a protective cloth over emerging plants and remove it when the plants are old enough to tolerate damage. On stone fruit trees, early harvest may be the only option. Various general predators are known to attack cucumber beetles. So here you can read the tolerance level is pretty high for these. Their damage is not typically going to kill the plant or affect the harvest. On smaller plants, cover them up to keep them off so that, because like we said before, the damage to an emerging plant is going to be more, the threshold is going to be lower because that damage causes more percentage damage to the plant. But here it just says let them do their thing. You can cover it up to kind of keep them off of those young plants. So in this case, if you saw this damage on your bean plant, probably wouldn't do anything about it. Not always the answer that you think you should get when you find something that's eating your plant. So I hope you guys learned something about integrated pest management. I hope that you will explore the University of California IPM site. It's been a wealth of knowledge for me to help me find what the best answer is to finding a pest and pest damage on a plant. The answer is not always a spray. The answer is not always to pick them off and kill them, although you could try to sit here with some tweezers or some needle nose pliers and just squish them just because they are causing some damage. But I don't have that kind of time on my hands. So in this case, I would let them do their thing and know that their damage is probably not going to be detrimental to my bean harvest. So like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. And if you need me, I was going to pull up my my email address again, but I used, oh, there it is. All right, so here we go. This is my email address again, jcmgev@uga.edu. And you can always call the office or visit the office at 706-367-6344. I hope you all take care and have a wonderful day.